Hey guys, Ponce here back on PoE with another build because my previous one died. It happens. Unfortunately, in my case, it was that old Ice Crash build that I did the video on. And what actually happened was I was watching Man vs. Game stream, and I kind of went to type something in his chat, and then I hear like this, ah, and then I look over, and what actually happened was I parked him on top of some poisonous ground, so he just kind of passively died, and I didn't know what was happening. So that was unfortunate, but lesson learned, don't watch streams like Hardcore Path of Exile. Or if you are going to, when you go to type in chat or pay a lot of attention to what's happening in the stream, take your character back to town. I guess Man vs. Game stream was so entertaining, it killed my character. Or something, anyway. So anyway, back to this build. It is a Vigilant Strike Endurance Charge spamming build. It's not the most complicated thing ever, but the endurance charge generating mechanic I thought was kind of novel. Basically, what Vigilant Strike is this very, very high base damage attack, and it gives you a buff where you take less damage when the buff is up. The catch is that it has an internal cooldown which can only be bypassed by expending an endurance charge. And an endurance charge, for those of you guys not too familiar with this game, is a little buff, a temporary buff you can give yourself. The base duration is about 10 seconds, and you get these little balls that float around you, and you take less damage while they're up. So basically, you're expending buffs that normally allow you to take less damage to deal more damage. And since I'll be attacking relatively quickly, the idea is to get these endurance charges as quickly as possible and automate it as much as possible. So just to show you guys what I'm working with here, Vigilant Strike, as I said right there. Then we're going to pair it with most likely multi-strike, melee splash, because I do want some AoE. This build is slightly lacking in AoE, so this gives us a little bit. Melee physical damage, just up the damage, possibly added fire damage just as an extra little punch. We'll see if that's necessary or not. There are obviously a bunch of options we can work with. I was thinking maybe swapping in an endurance charge and melee stun for single target purposes if I'm having trouble generating endurance charges if there's not enough stuff around, and maybe to work with Immortal Call, but we'll get into that in a minute. This is definitely on that maybe pile, something I would experiment with much later down the line. So anyway, the curse we'll be using obviously is going to be Warlord's Mark. Those of you guys familiar with Warlord's Mark, it's the endurance charge generating thing aside from the life leech effects and all that stuff. Now, Vengeance is basically my automated endurance charge generating thing, aside from just manually casting Enduring Cry, which we'll get into in a minute. So Vengeance, what it is it's an automatic counterattack. Basically, every time I'm attacked, I have a 30% chance of being... Let's just turn that up here. Of counterattacking with my weapon, so it's right there, as you can see. And then I paired that with Endurance Charge on melee stun, extra stun threshold thing, so this support makes it easier to stun people. And considering I'm already using a two-hander anyway with good base damage, odds of me stunning are pretty good. Right now I'm using an axe, but if I pair it with a hammer or a mace-type weapon, it gets even easier. Maybe I'll throw on an extra melee physical thing just for the hell of it, but we'll see. Now getting down to cast when damage taken. The reason I actually got that support gem, those of you guys not aware, is just as the name says, cast when damage taken. When I take a certain amount of damage, it casts the spell it's paired with. Now what I was going to do is I was going to pair it with what's it called? This thing right here, Enduring Cry. Turns out they actually changed that at some point because I haven't really kept up to date with Path of Exile very well. Enduring Cry used to be a spell. Now it's not considered a spell anymore, and to be paired with cast when damage taken, it has to be a spell. Alright, so no longer possible. I can see why they did it. It was kind of a no-brainer thing that everyone should have just taken because you basically always have Enduring Cry going off all the time. So that means now I have to manually cast Enduring Cry if I want extra things. Now, there could be some very sneaky ways if I want to get really clever, possibly with cast when damage taken to somehow get extra endurance charges. I'd have to think about that for a while, but I just found out today that Enduring Cry doesn't work, so maybe I'll come up with something later. If you guys have any ideas in the comments, you can let me know. I'll go, oh yeah, there's that. But aside from that, maybe I'll try and work with Immortal Call and Molten Shell on cast when damage taken since I already have that, or since I already bought the thing. Again, since I was considering, maybe Endurance Charge on melee stun with the base Vigilant Strike attack, if I do that, maybe I could pair it with Immortal Call for, essentially infinite immunity to physical damage, sort of. And we'll see how that works. Considering, so much has changed since the last time I've used a bunch of things, I wouldn't be surprised if they've added some kind of internal cooldown to Immortal Call or something where that doesn't work anymore. But anyway, Molten Shell is probably an easy thing to pair it with. Now, auras, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I don't like to commit with them too much. Probably should, but, it's subject to how mana regenerates and all that stuff, and I don't really want to worry about that early on. I'll deal with it later. Herald of Ash is sort of the definite thing I'm going with. Again, to add sort of a little bit more AoE viability to the spec. Since I'm working with so little. Melee splash on the base stack being the only thing. And since Vigilant Strike's base damage is so high, it should work quite well with the Herald of Ash fire explosion thing, since it's based on overkill damage. And additionally, I can maybe do stuff like Vitality, Determination, and et cetera, et cetera. And, auras are auras. There's a lot of good ones. So we'll deal with that later. Anyway, let's actually show you guys what the ultimate build I'm going for should look like. I'll just kind of overlay it over the screen there, and we can turn my webcam off. So this is kind of a rough idea. I started Marauder. I don't like to commit to these builds too hard since, do have respec points and stuff. And obviously this is like super endgame build. I've spent 89 or 98 points here. Kind of go up here and get mostly tanky stuff. I'm focusing almost exclusively on getting as much HP and life regen as possible, and getting a whole bunch of life leech things along the way, since there's so much life leech potential on this build because it's pretty much all physical damage. So yeah, just mainly me focusing on getting as tanky as possible, despite me holding a two-hander instead of a shield and one-hander, which is slow down progression. So yeah, and I get all the endurance charge things along the way and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully this turns out well. I can show off what this actually looks like in game in a moment here. Let me just fix the screen. Let's get back. Alright, so yeah, just kind of go out here and kill some basic enemies. Right now I just entered the Merciless mode, I think it's called. Second one. I always get Merciless and Cruel mixed up. And Merciless. So just grab that up. Just kind of do that. And then, so as you can see, I can't auto-attack again because I didn't have any charges. But, if you do it like that, get some charges, and then you can just kind of keep going like that. And I permanently have this this buff up here. You take reduced damage when hit. The Fortify buff, that comes from Vigilant Strike. And Life Leech is not really, or rather mana is not too much of an issue since I do get some mana leech from Warlord's Mark here. In addition to that, I also get a little bit for my belt. That's kind of whatever. I'm not going to be using that belt forever here. Look at all those charges I have. I just kind of run into things. And despite being primarily a single target thing, the AoE is enough, and it deals quite a bit of damage. I run into a big pack of guys. I'm still sitting on 2 endurance charges, despite the fact that I'm spamming my primary attack. Now, for those of you guys curious, multi-strike does not expend a whole bunch of endurance charges. It only counts as one attack. Just run in here and do stuff like that. Alright, well, you guys kind of get the idea, I suppose. Not too much to it. Again, this isn't a 100% complete build. I've just kind of got it to the point where it's finally sort of starting to work. So we're at the tip of the iceberg here. I'm hoping, we'll get a lot smoother as we go. But yeah, that's my my Vigilant Strike Endurance Charge build there. Hope you guys had fun with that, and you can kind of work with the raw tools I've given you and maybe expound upon this idea or something. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you around.